I came home from a plumbing job and heard steel chewing through rose bushes before I even killed the engine. Not birds, not traffic, steel, diesel, and that awful soft crunch of something gentle getting flattened by something expensive. By the time I turned into my driveway, Caroline Westfield's bulldozers were halfway through my dead wife's memorial garden, and Caroline herself was standing in my yard in white designer heels like she was unveiling a resort instead of bulldozing a grave that happened to bloom. She smiled, walked over with a stack of papers, and said, "Danny, we're building something absolutely beautiful here. This is going to increase your property value significantly." Sarah had spent 18 months building that garden after chemo, one David Austin rose at a time. After she died, that patch of earth became the only place where I could still feel her in the air. Caroline's crew destroyed it in 18 minutes. "This is my land," I said. Caroline fluttered the papers. "Technically, this section is community space per an older survey. We'll compensate you, of course. $3,000 seems fair. $3,000 for the place where my wife fought for her life." That was the moment I stopped being shocked and started getting calm. I smiled and said, "You know what? Go ahead and finish your beautiful clubhouse." Her face brightened. She thought grief had made me weak. "My name's Danny Kowalski. I'm 48, a union plumber, and I run a small demolition business on the side. After Sarah died, I thought my biggest problem was figuring out how to raise our daughter Emma without falling apart in front of her. Emma was 17, sharp as a tack, and carrying more grief than any kid should. There's one thing about me Sarah used to tease me for. I document everything. Photos, timestamps, notebooks, backups. So while Caroline kept talking about community enhancement, I started taking pictures. Bulldozers, torn roots, foundation lines, permit placard, tire marks through Sarah's roses, all of it. That night I spread county maps across the kitchen table. Emma came in for water and told me Brittany Westfield had been telling kids at school I was just after money. The next morning I found 3 HOA-style violations taped to my door: commercial vehicle, noise nuisance, unsightly equipment. My truck had been in that driveway for 15 years, but suddenly it was ruining civilization. I called the city and got Tyler Westfield, building inspector, Caroline's brother-in-law. "These are serious violations, Mr. Kowalski. Then send me the permits for the clubhouse on my property." He went quiet just a second too long. 2 days later I hired an independent surveyor named Marcus Webb. 3 days after that, he handed me a report showing Caroline's clubhouse foundation extended 15 feet onto my land. Then he found the twist that changed everything. The environmental clearance on file had been signed by a consultant who'd been dead for 2 years. That's when I knew this wasn't an HOA spat. This was fraud with landscaping. Caroline kept escalating. She started fining me $150 a day for architectural violations. My bank started asking questions. Clients began canceling. Emma came home one afternoon and locked herself in her room because Brittany had told the whole cafeteria I was using my dead wife to chase easy money. I won't lie, that was the night I almost folded. Caroline had already sent flowers, white roses of all things, with a note offering $15,000 to put this behind us. I stood in the wreck of Sarah's garden with diesel still sour in the dirt and thought maybe peace was worth swallowing the insult. Then my neighbor Mrs. Ellis knocked on my door, holding a mason jar full of cloudy brown water. "Danny, does this look right to you?" It smelled like chlorine and wet concrete. Her well had gone bad a few months after construction started. So had others quietly, because people didn't want trouble. Marcus went back to work, pulling old hydrology records, and then he called me in a voice that made my skin go cold. "Danny, you need to see this." Under Caroline's clubhouse site was an old spring system feeding protected wetlands, and the habitat supported endangered Blue Ridge salamanders. The construction hadn't just crossed my property line. It had cracked into a protected spring and likely contaminated neighborhood wells. Caroline wasn't just trespassing anymore. She was sitting on a federal environmental problem with forged paperwork and poisoned water. That changed the whole war. I stopped calling local offices and called the EPA. Then I called Jennifer Martinez, an environmental lawyer Marcus recommended. She looked at the survey, the forged clearance, the water tests, and my photos and said 2 words Caroline never imagined hearing about herself: federal exposure. The EPA sent investigator Sarah Rodriguez, young, sharp, and unimpressed by local politics. She walked my property, studied the documents, and by the time she reached the forged clearance her expression had gone cold. Mr. Kowalski, this is serious. The case cracked wide open when the EPA subpoenaed city emails. Caroline to Tyler. Fast-track the environmental clearance. Henderson's old signature should work. Nobody checks the old studies anyway. Tyler back. 10,000 covers my risk premium. There it was. Bribery. Fraud. Conspiracy. And because scared, arrogant people always get sloppier, Caroline made it worse. She called me and offered $100,000 to withdraw any complaints and let the neighborhood heal. I recorded every word. After that, Tyler showed up sweating on my porch, trying to act like he'd only just realized things had gotten complicated. You took money, I told him. Families drank bad water while you signed permits with a dead man's name on them. By then 12 families had documented contaminated wells. The FBI stepped in on the bribery side. Caroline's dream clubhouse was no longer a prestige project. It was a crime scene with crown molding. Then 2 days before the hearing, somebody cut the hydraulic lines on my excavator. Professional sabotage. I spent Saturday repairing it under a work light with Emma handing me tools. Dad, she asked, are you nervous? No, I said. I'm excited. She laughed. That is a deeply weird answer. Maybe, I said, but karma's finally on the schedule. Monday morning, 2 hours before federal court, Caroline showed up at my house with 3 HOA board members and an emergency resolution in hand. She claimed the board was exercising emergency eminent domain over my property because my business operations posed a neighborhood hazard. I actually laughed. The woman who forged environmental documents, poisoned wells, and built a luxury clubhouse over protected habitat was standing on my porch pretending my septic system was the danger. When she realized I wasn't folding, I called FBI agent Michael Torres right in front of her. Caroline Westfield is here attempting to seize my property to interfere with federal testimony. 20 minutes later, 3 federal vehicles rolled into my driveway. Watching Caroline get arrested in a white suit at 7:30 in the morning was one of the purest little joys of my life. The board members scattered. Caroline kept babbling about HOA authority while Agent Torres read her rights, and all I could think was this: bullies love local rules because local rules can be bent. Federal law doesn't bend. It drops. At 9 o'clock I sat in federal court while Judge Williams reviewed the case. Caroline had traded her designer white for an orange jumpsuit. The judge didn't waste much time. Clean Water Act violations, endangered habitat destruction, forged clearances, bribery, contamination, witness intimidation. It piled up fast. Then came the order. Immediate cessation of all harmful activity. Immediate removal of the structure. Full restitution. And when the judge asked whether I was qualified to handle the demolition safely, I stood and said, "Yes, Your Honor. I can begin today." Caroline had scheduled her grand opening party for 11. That part still makes me smile. So there they were, Meadowbrook's finest in sundresses and loafers, sipping champagne on the patio of a clubhouse they thought was about to win awards. The mayor was there. Local business owners. The same people who'd whispered about me. Then I rolled in with my excavator and a federal marshal escort. The marshal announced the federal order. I looked out at those stunned faces and told them plain. The structure had been built illegally on stolen land, over protected habitat, with forged documents, and it had contaminated neighborhood drinking water. There would be no ribbon cutting. There would be demolition. The first strike went into the infinity pool. Concrete cracked like a rifle shot. Water burst loose and raced across the patio. Somebody screamed. Somebody dropped a champagne flute. I kept going. Tile, marble beams, custom trim. All of it came down under the same unsightly equipment Caroline had fined me over. 6 hours of careful destruction, and every wall that fell took a lie down with it. Then the foundation gave way along the deepest cut, and the spring came back. Clear water, cold and bright, bubbling up through busted concrete like the earth itself had finally had enough. Mrs. Ellis stood there with both hands over her mouth. "Danny," she said, almost crying, "it's running clear." That's the moment that stayed with me, more than Caroline in cuffs or the cameras. Clean water returning. Something honest rising back to the surface. 6 months later, Emma and I rebuilt Sarah's memorial garden beside stone channels protecting the restored spring. We planted her favorite roses again, red this time. The restitution money rebuilt Emma's college fund, expanded my business, and funded a scholarship in Sarah's name for students studying environmental protection. Caroline pleaded guilty. Tyler lost his job. The HOA dissolved and got replaced by a voluntary neighborhood association with transparent budgets and common sense. And me, I learned something grief had been trying to teach me all along. When people see pain on you, they assume weakness. When they see kindness, they assume softness. When they see a man with mud on his boots standing across from someone in white linen and expensive perfume, they think they already know who matters more. But power built on arrogance has one fatal flaw. It depends on decent people getting tired first. Sometimes walking away is peace. Sometimes walking away is permission. Sarah used to say roses punish arrogance. She was right. So does the truth. It just blooms slower. So let me ask you this. If somebody destroyed the one place that kept your loved one's memory alive, would you have taken the money and walked away? Or would you have fought until their whole little empire came down the legal way? Tell me where you draw the line between justice and revenge. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a corrupt official, or a neighbor who thought money made them untouchable, share your story. I'd love to hear it.